So, I just watched Gladiator II, and it was pretty good. This is the first direct sequel to a Best Picture winner since Hannibal, the sequel to Silence of the Lambs, was released in 2001. Oddly enough, Hannibal was also directed by Ridley Scott, the man who directed both Gladiator movies. Just a nice coincidence, I noticed. Anyway, Gladiator II takes place 16 years after the first Gladiator, and it follows a man called Lucius, played by Paul Mescal, who is captured by the Roman army and becomes a gladiator. Under the sponsorship of Macrinus, played by Denzel Washington, he fights in the Colosseum with the end goal being fighting the Roman general who captured him, Pedro Pascal's Acacius. Now, I couldn't help but notice, while scouring around the internet looking for opinions on the film, that the vast consensus is that whether the film is good, okay, bad, or straight up terrible, it is definitely not as good as the first one. Well, I guess I'm taking the minority opinion on this one because I actually thought Gladiator 2 was a tad better than Gladiator 1. Not by a whole lot, but slightly, yes. Of course, you don't have to agree, you probably won't, but indulge me for a few minutes and allow me to make the case for Gladiator 2 being better than the Best Picture winning original. I recommend you check out my video on the original Gladiator before watching this one, for the full context of my opinion on that film, although I will go over the important parts here. The biggest reason why I think Gladiator 2 is better than the first Gladiator is, well, I didn't think the first Gladiator was that great. It's a solid 6 out of 10 movie for me, that does its job well enough, with a few elements that do stand out in a positive way, but I never considered it a groundbreaking masterpiece of any sort. It's not the greatest Ridley Scott movie, it's not the greatest Best Picture winner, hell, it shouldn't even have won that year. I still think Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon would have been a better winner. And it's not even the greatest swords and sandals film I've ever seen. The 50s had that genre covered. So I look at Gladiator as just a good film, nothing more. It's good. It's okay. I've seen worse, I've seen better, it's just a movie for me. Cut to 24 years later and Gladiator 2 shows up, and it too is a good movie. It's okay. Also, nothing too special, but a solid film that does its job well, and an enjoyable viewing experience in the theater. It too is a 6 out of 10 film for me. It's above average. It does some things well and some things poorly, kinda like the first one. So right off the bat, I found both films to be rather similar in quality, which is appropriate because the films follow a similar story structure with characters in the sequel that echo characters in the original, although the films are not 100% identical, which is an important point that I'll get into later. So how do I determine which film I like more? Let's look at a few elements and compare. I'll start with the visuals and the action, which was a mixed bag in the original Gladiator. Some of the action scenes were better than others, and all of them were shot and edited in a way that didn't complement the choreography or the epic scale the film tried to achieve. It had too many close-ups and quick cuts that prevent you from experiencing the action to its fullest. Gladiator 2, on the other hand, I thought handled the action scenes much better. The shots were longer and the frames were wider, which made everything more clear and easy to follow. I also thought the action in Gladiator 2 was more fun and varied. The first Gladiator had a scene with chariots and a scene with tigers. Good, but that's pretty much it. Gladiator 2, on the other hand, had a fighter riding a rhinoceros and an action scene where the entire Colosseum was flooded with water and filled with bloodthirsty sharks. Hell yes! Now, of course, some people would consider this as a cheap surface-level extravaganza with no deeper meaning to it, and thus not put so much value on it, and I completely understand these people. I'm just not one of them. I never considered Gladiator to be a meaningful or deep film, at least not in any unique or standout way. So when I walked into Gladiator 2, all I wanted was to be entertained. And entertained I was. I mean, come on! It's sharks in a Colosseum! Have some fun for a change. How could you not be entertained by that? As for the visual aspects, I also thought Gladiator 2 was a slight improvement over the first one. Say what you will about Ridley Scott, but this man is a visual master, and Gladiator 2 is a good-looking film. Sure, it's not the greatest-looking film of all time, but hey, neither was the first one. I liked the color palette in the sequel better, and the visual effects were also improved. It's a big, epic Roman Empire movie, and the visuals do their job well. So after looking at the action and the visuals, let's take a look at the more important elements and compare them. I'm of course talking about the characters and the story. And there's no better place to start than with the protagonists, Maximus versus Lucius. Both protagonists were good, solid leads in my opinion, which might irk Maximus fans who think he's more than that, but again, I wasn't blown away by his character or Russell Crowe's performance for that matter, which won the Academy Award for Best Actor. In my opinion, a baffling decision. I mean, he was good, but not that good. He was better in A Beautiful Mind than he was in Gladiator, but for that he didn't win the Oscar. Whatever. Paul Mescal's performance, on the other hand, I thought was just as good as Russell's, if not better. I thought he showed just as much range in his emotions, and I thought his character was well fleshed out with motivations that at times come into conflict, which created a layer of drama for the character that I thought Maximus lacked. This was my biggest issue with the first movie. After Maximus becomes a gladiator and sets his sights on Emperor Commodus, all the character development just stops dead in its tracks. Both Maximus and Commodus have reached their final stage. Maximus is a gladiator with nothing to lose seeking vengeance, and Commodus is the evil and conniving ruler trying to get rid of him. Nothing else changes until the climax when they finally face off. The rest of the film is a gauntlet of action scenes that were a mixed bag, interspersed with repetitive dialogue scenes that don't really move the needle in terms of character development or emotion. In Gladiator II, this is not the case. I felt that Lucius's character kept changing and evolving throughout the film, thanks to the things that he experiences and due to certain revelations about other characters that are revealed to him. That made his character more interesting, in my opinion, than Maximus. I did feel like Maximus's character was better set up, due to Gladiator's vastly superior opening. This is the only pure and clear victory for the original over the sequel, in my opinion. Gladiator has one of the greatest openings to any movie ever. The first 40 minutes set up all the characters and the main conflict perfectly. It's everything after the first 40 minutes that was an issue for me. In the sequel, we get a really rushed and lackluster opening, which didn't fill me with much hope. But the more the film progressed, I found it to be more enjoyable and more interesting, the complete opposite of the original. A big reason why this is the case is that my favorite character in the original, Marcus Aurelius, only shows up in the first 40 minutes, and the rest of the film is hurt by his omission. My favorite character in Gladiator II, however, who was also my favorite character in both films combined, was easily Denzel Washington's Macrinus, who has way more screen time than Marcus Aurelius did. Denzel Washington's performance was legitimately Oscar-worthy, and he was easily the best thing about the film. He's also the big difference maker in terms of the plots of both films. I said before that Gladiator II echoes story beats and characters from the original, but isn't 100% identical. Well, Macrinus is the reason why. I love how he starts off echoing the original film's Proximo, so you automatically think you know where the film and that character are going to go. But as the film progresses, we discover things that change him from being just a Proximo 2.0 into his own unique thing, a much more layered and fascinating character than he first appears. You also get a similar, if lesser, experience with Pedro Pascal's Acacius, another character who presents himself a certain way when he first appears, only for us to discover that there's more to him that meets the eye. These types of revelations, plot twists, intrigue, and mystery were missing from the original Gladiator. It's not as if the original needed them, but they were a welcome addition here. They made the experience more memorable and valuable, in my opinion. There are more elements and characters to compare between the two. I thought Commodus, for example, was better than the twin emperors in the sequel, because his character was more fleshed out. But the twin emperors were entertaining for what they were, and the addition of Macrinus tipped the scale of the overall cast of characters in the sequel's favor. I did think the original had a better climax, so in terms of story, it's a closer call than others, but I still give the edge to the sequel, because I thought the story was more interesting for a larger chunk of time. Take the original's opening and ending, and the sequel's middle, as in everything in between the opening 20 minutes and closing 20 minutes, and you got yourself a legitimately great film. But as it stands, you got two solid films, overall pretty good. Both have their issues, but if you ask me, the quality of the films is way closer than the rest of the internet would have you suggest. And in my honest opinion, due to improved visuals, more entertaining action set pieces, more intriguing characters, better overall performances, and a story that changes and develops over time, I would give the overall edge to the sequel. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please hit the like button, it'll help my channel out. And if you want to see more of my videos, then subscribe to my channel so you won't miss a thing. Thank you all very much, and have a good one.